is a true Hawaiian? What is a true Hawaiian? Aloha.
Good evening. Welcome to the First Friday show. I'm Mililani Trask, and I'll be your hostess for this March 2nd edition, 2012, First Friday, the Unauthorized News. If you're tuning in tonight, and it is Friday, March 2nd, then you're watching a live show. We welcome your calls, your comments for myself, our commentator, and our special guest, Trustee Hulu Lindsey. Give us a call. The number tonight is 834-2886, 834-2886. Tonight we're going to be looking at a number of issues, including some of the legislation and also a special feature updating, as we had promised a few months ago, to give our community more information about the movement of the OHA settlement in the legislature. But before we get to that, let's take a look at some unauthorized news. Welcoming to the show tonight our regular commentator, Professor Manu Kaiama from the University of Hawaii Manoa campus. Welcome back, Manu.
Aloha, Mili.
And also we're welcoming the show tonight a very special guest, our new OHA trustee from the island of Maui, who will be briefing us later in the main segment on what is happening with the OHA settlement bill. Welcome to the show, Trustee Hulu Lindsey from the island of Maui.
Mahalo for having me.
Serious news tonight. And important news for our own Olelo station and all of us here who run community programming through Olelo. This is the movement of House Bill 2874. This measure was put in by the Speaker of the House, Calvin Say, and it is moving despite significant community opposition from ourselves and everyone in the Olelo family. This is a House bill that seeks to permanently cap all of the funding for the community access centers and to cut it back to 2010 levels. Here at Olelo, we have always supported broadband initiatives, and we certainly support broadband initiatives for the public school. But this measure is not really accomplishing that. Olelo has had a long and very fruitful partnership with the educational sector. But this measure is actually rolling back the current funding for all of the Olelo programs that are supported now back to 2010 levels. And this is the amount of funding that was actually paid to the different projects in 2011. But it was based on revenues that came in from 2010. There's been all kinds of testimony on this measure, but despite this fact, it passes out today, March 2nd, with some amendments, and it will now move to the Senate. I certainly will be presenting my testimony in opposition, and I'm encouraging our whole First Friday team and everyone in Olelo to come out. I know, Manu, you took a look at the measure and also some of the community testimony. What did you find?
Right. I thought it was really interesting because in just 2 days, 137 testimonies were actually submitted to the Finance Committee. And of those 137 testimonies, 135 were in opposition. So it's kind of interesting that in spite of that overwhelming opposition, it still got passed. Of course, I think it's interesting to note who was in favor, and it's Oceanic Time Warner's president and CEO, Bob Marlowe. He was one of them. I'm not sure who the other one is. I think it was the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism that also testified in favor. So when we look at the people who, there were 16 yeses, and Representatives Oshiro, Lee, Choi, Cullen, Har, Hashim, Ichiyama, Jordan, Kawakami, Morikawa, Tokioka, Yamashita said yes with reservation. I really think that, what is a yes with reservation? Make a decision. Either say yes, I'm saying yes, and I don't care what all of this testimony and these people said, or I'm going to say no, and I'm going to stand on principle. So anyway, it's up to us to go back there and figure out what's going on. I know they're going to have a couple of meetings, and I think that we just need to keep alert of what Olelo is planning for the future, and we're hoping that we go out and we get more people besides just the First Friday staff saying that this is not good.
Well, this measure had 137 testimonies submitted. This has to be a bill that received significant, one of the largest amount of testimony. I've been tracking energy and other bills. Right. We're lucky if we have 10 to 12 testimonies, yay and nay, combined. This thing has 137 testimonies, 135 opposed,
Right.
only 2
And
in
it
support.
passes.
And it passes without a single no vote. The only one excused was Representative Ward.
Right.
All the rest voted yes or yes with reservations. The thing about it, which I thought was very dishonest, was that this bill was supported by people who were saying that we needed to cap levels of funding so that we could take that money and provide public school services for our students in public schools so that they could have more education and exposure by learning the Olelo process. You know, one of the things to me when I saw the testimony and looked at it, we all know that the best program and the oldest program that was set up for our public school and is still running was a program set up with our students in Waianae by Sparky Rodriguez, who did testify, and he was not in support of this measure.
That's right. That's right. I have his testimony. It was really interesting to read because when you first think and hear about the bill, you think this probably is a good idea, especially for our public schools. But his testimony says specifically, you know, the bill seeks to divide and weaken our communities. And I have to agree now that I've had a chance to look at the bill. He says that after school hours, the way it's written, students, teachers now are public and no public access is allowed within this proposal. So the idea that he went out, he talked to principals, teachers, staff, parents, the community basically, and he did his research on the school districts. Basically, he said that when they went down this road, those that he could find that agreed and actually adopted this, test scores did not improve. Okay, so here they're saying that's going to happen. Instead, they had a little bit more ability of communication did improve, increased in sexting, bullying occurred, bullying occurred, and programs were forced to end. So the money that was spent was lost. The interesting thing about this is I think it's Time Warner, you know, besides, you know, our own state government voting yes, or actually, you know, going in and giving testimony in favor. I'd like to take a look at the people who are voting and all of those that voted yes, and take a look at their political contributions and who is giving them political contributions. Time Warner has deep pockets.
They sure do.
So that's the homework for us to do.
You know, when I looked at it, I thought it was very deceptive to say we're going to cap people at their level. If you look at a program such as Sparky's for Our Children in Waianae, every year that program has expanded, but also every year that program's costs go up. All of our costs go up because the costs are going up. And even if we stay at the current level of production, the costs are going up. They do go up. It's tied to fuel, it's tied to everything else. So when they say that we're going to cap someone at the current level, it's not really true. They're cutting everyone back to the 2010 levels. And I think, you know, the big thing about this is that the commitment of Olelo and all of us who support it is for public access for all in the community, That's why we have Hawaiian programming, we have Filipino, Samoan programming. When they initiate a program like this, what they're saying is that that's not going to be the rule anymore. They're going to be able to come in and pass legislation to say that it won't be access for all in our state. They're going to favor one or another. And in this case, trying to manipulate program funding for our public schools and not telling us that this is really going to cut back. And Sparky's program was, I think, dishonest to say the least. This measure will now pass into the House. This is House Bill 2874, House Draft 1. We need to organize, unify, and go to the Senate and make sure that our voice is heard to stop this measure so that we can protect public access for everyone in Hawaii. Now, an update on where we are with the Kaiama church burials. Things are not getting any better on that front.
Doesn't look like it is. You know, first, I just want to start out with a nice big mahalo to Kamuala Kala'i, Paulette Kalekini, and Claire Hiva Steele, who are three very strong women who have stayed the course, who have done in their own ways, tried to attempt to make this whole process with our iwi kupuna being dug up over at Kawaiaha'o more pono. And unfortunately, you know, things are still challenging over there. If we take a look, This multi-purpose building originally was supposed to cost about $10 million. The costs have risen now to about $21 million, so it's doubled. Interesting things that have just recently happened is that back in January 11th, Frank Pestana, who is the church chairman of the Board of Trustees, and Kurt Kekuna, who is the pastor, sent OHA a letter. And I don't know, Hulu, if you want to comment on it, but it was complaining basically about Kai Markel, who is an OHA employee, for testifying at a hearing against Kawaiaha'o. And the reason that letter went forward is because OHA has supported the building in the tune of about $1 million. So on January 30th, a letter was sent to Kawaiaha'o from Richard Pezzulo, who is the interim chief executive officer, and basically supporting Kai Markel's testimony, saying what he did in his testimony was to tell the truth, which is what we would expect. So I think that was kind of an interesting dialogue going back and forth. Then, however, in this past, I guess, 2 weeks or so, they have held a protest, okay, to actually give names and voices to the 300 or 400 so kupuna that have been dug up and displaced from their original resting place. And the church, the reason why they had this protest is they started to say the names of these kupuna because the church has claimed that they actually don't have an identity. They're just, either perhaps from the plague or from the flood, the things we were talking about. Since so many people died, they were just interned very hastily in this area. And that's not true. Comes from a very reliable source that the church actually has maps that has the names of the people that were buried in these areas. But they are denying it because they want to go forward with the building of this multi-purpose center. So interesting thing too is just recently, looking at 2 letters that came from OHA and both written on the same day, signed by Colette Machado and supported, by the trustees. And basically, both of them have the same message, but one is a little softer than the other. So I know Hulu and I were speaking before the show. She's saying, I have no idea why that happened. You're inundated with paperwork, but it's quite possible that one letter went out before you had your trustee meeting and maybe the other one went out after, and that seemed reasonable to us. We'll have to ask Colette and find out for sure. But basically the first letter that we looked at, it says that, it kind of rails Kawaiaha'o and says, your accounts aren't in order, your backup documents are missing, you've had a failure to complete the project on time, you're not maintaining your files correctly, the report due to OHA was not timely, but then the letter sort of ends with a soft note, a supportive note saying, but we know that this building is a worthy cause, a worthy mission. And then the second letter starts off with talking about how, it's been very disappointing, and goes on and says the other things that the church has done incorrectly, but it ends with, despite our disappointment, we're hoping that you can, through ho'oponopono, make things work because we stand ready to assist. So I do think it almost sounds by the tone of those letters that OHA has, just had its fill and may be ready to excuse itself from this, disaster. I don't know if you're able to even comment on that, Hulu, but are you? Are you pleading the fifth now? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I think your assumption is almost correct. We are frustrated with the situation there at Kawaiaha'o, and we're at a point where we don't want to get involved anymore.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's got to be tough because how can you keep ignoring, what's going on there? And I mean, it's just really a difficult situation to be in.
Yes, it's very difficult.
I think it always is when burials are involved, but for months people have crossed their fingers. I mean, we've referred to this on the show, hoping that some way there could be a resolution. But, at this point in time, the clock is running. I know OHA, at least I have spoken with Trustee Roena Akana, who indicated to me that $1 million had been allocated. She did not believe that there would be any further funding forthcoming, and I wonder, given the delays, will this project actually be able to move because the funding is actually expended and there doesn't appear to be any other funding that Kaiama has. But we'll keep an eye on this and continue to update our listeners. Just a little bit of information now coming in from the Hawaiian homestead community, and I think, Manu, we are going to have to commit ourselves to doing a larger show in the coming months, asking the question, what is going on at Hawaiian homelands and who is really in charge there? This past week, a rather large petition package was delivered to the state DLNR Office of the Historic Preservation Division. It contained a petition signed by 109 Hawaiian homesteaders from Kekaha, Kauai, all of them sending a petition to the DLNR against Robin Danner's latest project, which they do not want and which they are opposing, saying that they don't want a development in the middle of their community, and raising the issue about protecting the iwi that they believe are buried there. It appears that Danner's proposal has been given the go-ahead by Alapaki Nahalea, and that the appropriate archaeological and historic protections were not in place. The petition was sent in by Ruth Potts and Joseph Naka'ahiki. It is now in the possession of the Shipte's office. They have not yet responded because they do not have a tax map key identifying the parcel. So if listeners are out there from the homestead, get that TMK over to Pua IU, and she may be able to move forward to protect those iwis, which Danner apparently doesn't seem too concerned about. Second news on the homestead front, proposals for DHHL rule changes were put to the commission last month. They are now moving forward. The rule changes are quite severe. They're going to impose restrictions that will only allow Robin Danner and her group now to qualify for lands on the homestead. Another point, those homesteaders who are opposed to this, who have been sending out quite a bit of emails, thank you for including me, remember to keep the senators and the members of the House Hawaiian Caucus informed, because there's significant complaints that are coming in now to the members of the legislature, and they are beginning to track this. And finally, this on the complaints of those from the Anahola homestead who have been asking for the last several months for the details on Robin Danner's 55-acre energy project. It now appears that somehow the development rights were transferred to Robin Danner without any bidding being posted according to law. Whenever a state agency puts a job out, they have to submit a bid and take a look at it and compare the proposals. This was not done in the case of Anahola. The second thing that I've determined looking at this is that there were development rights for the project. And these are assets of the department. When you move to develop a project, you either bring in a developer that you hire, or you have them submit a bid. In this case, neither was done. In the case of Anahola, it appears that Alapaki Nahalea decided to give the development rights for the Anahola project to his friend Robin without even bothering to have them assessed, without even bothering to sell them. Development rights are an asset of the department. You don't give them away to your friends and forget to put the notice up. I think that more and more we're beginning to see that there's really not leadership on the part of the administrator there, and it appears that Robin Danner is acting as the now the administrator of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. We better focus on this further in the future. But tonight, we're returning to a real important topic, one that we promised our listeners we'd be taking a more detailed look at, and that is the OHA settlement. And here to join us, we welcome to the show for the first time Hulu Lindsey, who was recently appointed by Governor Abercrombie to fill the vacancy left by Boyd Mossman, who is now residing in Kona. Welcome to the show, Trustee Lindsey.
Thank you, Mililani. Thank you for having me.
I was so very impressed when I read the OHA newspaper. The governor statement upon confirming you was very laudatory, and he took quite a bit of time talking about your capacity and your background. In fact, he said that there was no better qualified nominee than yourself. I'm wondering if you could start out by telling us about your family and your background and the experience you have that led you to submit your name.
Thank you, Mililani. Yes, I was born on the Big Island of Hawaii in Kohala and raised in Waimea. I'm part of that big Lindsey clan. And then moved to Hilo, where jobs were more available for my father, and lived and went to school in Keaukaha.
A Hawaiian homesteader.
Yes, we were homesteading there. Prior to the airport coming in, we were living on Krause Avenue. But I went to school in Keaukaha, Waikiakai before the tidal wave came in, and also at Hilo High. Then I moved to Oahu, and I graduated from Farrington High School and went to business school and ended up working for Governor Burns. It was such a pleasure working for a man that had such high expectations and so much love for the people. I worked for him for 8 years. I learned everything there was.
What were you doing for the Burns administration?
I worked as an assistant to the press secretary. So that was really fun. Got to know the governor's feelings because the press secretary wrote a lot of his speeches, his news releases. I had personal relationship with the governor as far as his asking opinions on what I thought. You know, he considered me the Hawaiian thinking. He says, "So, you ku'aina, what do you think about this?" And I'd express my feelings, you know, and he really appreciated that. I really had a nice 8 years with the governor. And then I met a man from Maui, and I moved to Maui. And the governor wrote me very nice letters to the chairman of the board at Maui Land and Pineapple. So I went to work there. I served as a properties administrator there, where I built employee housing for our pineapple employees. And we were able to close down Honolua Village and relocate all of our Hawaiian people. It wasn't easy to get them qualified for financing, but I was able to fly to California and meet with the Farmers Home Administration people and got our people all qualified. You know, their mortgages were like $34,000. Some of them had mortgages of $150 a month payments.
And most of them were Hawaiian and Filipino laborers.
Yes, our people, yeah. I really enjoyed being able to serve them that way. And then I was called to serve by our then mayor, Elmer F. Cravalho, as the Land Use and Codes Administrator for the County of Maui, where I oversaw all land development on the island, subdivisions, building permits, plumbing, electrical, and I was there when the shoreline management permit requirements came into play. So I was very fortunate to experience that process and know how it works. And then I went back to Maui Land and Pineapple, and I served in the land capacity as well. And I was able to work in the quiet titling department of the company and saw that our company was trying to quiet title our Hawaiian people's lands. And I thought, this can't be. So I went to speak with our CEO, Colin Cameron at the time, and I told him, you know, I think we need to tell our people what we're doing so that they can get their papers ready and verify that these lands are in fact theirs. So he was a very good person, good heart, loved our people. He told me, you go ahead and do what you need to do. So I did. I went out to Honolua, Honokahau, and Napili, and I talked with our people, and they were able to keep their lands till today. And that's something that I feel really happy about helping.
You know, Hulu, I had wanted to ask you, at the time that your name was submitted, and there were quite a few other names, at that time there was a controversy that broke out primarily because the Hawaiian civic clubs came forward and they were objecting very strongly to Chubby Vincente's, and a letter was sent out by Mililani Kamau went in which she pointed out that he had worked for A&B and that company had engaged in some very bad practices. But yet, I was interested that those concerns were not raised against you. There was no, you were not mentioned in that letter, nor was there ever concern raised in these several months that the trustees were not able to make a selection. And based on what you're saying, I mean, I believe that it is because the role that you played there was very different than what Chubby Vincentis was obviously doing at Alexander and Baldwin. But I was also very impressed with the fact that many, many people sent letters in to support your nomination. And actually, you know, when Manu and I were talking about the OHA settlement earlier in our previous show, we had talked about the fact that it was a good thing that you came on because your background with land management through the years, and now also with your own private company, yeah, you have a
I do.
Lindsey
Realty.
Lindsey Realty gives you a good foundation for looking at the settlement, and this is being put forward as a commercial opportunity for Hawaiians in this proposal. So this is a good way to segue, I think, into the settlement. You have been one of the trustees that was involved in taking a look at it. Have the trustees done a due diligence?
They certainly have. We hired consultants to do that due diligence, and we got a very thick book of investigations that our consultants did, and they took us around to every lot that is being offered us by the governor, and we were very pleased with what we saw. We can live with the due diligence. Not everything is perfect, but we can live with what's been reported to us.
Now you brought us a little photo which I'm going to hold up. Usually we put it on the screen through a JPEG, but this only walked in with Trustee Lindsey. But here's a picture of the parcels as you can see them from the air. On our previous show, we showed the TMKs, we showed the values, and we showed outlines of the pictures, but we didn't have an aerial photograph. And this is an aerial photograph of the area, which is on Oahu, down at the ocean front.
Yes,
yeah?
It is. This is Kaka'ako, and the parcel here is the old Fisherman's Wharf. And then we have a total of 10 lots here. Now these 2 lots abut Ala Moana Boulevard, and all of the lots total about 30 acres.
Now, in terms of the settlement came into OHA and it came into all of us as a bill in the legislature, but it was announced publicly, and that bill is moving. Now, people are saying that this is a take it or leave it proposal. And I'm wondering if you can explain what that really means, because the legislation says, here's the proposal. If you don't like it, it's null and void.
Well, it is a proposal made to OHA by the governor. And in fact, it is take it or leave it. It's a very good offer, in my opinion. And I, as a broker, I can see that the land is going to really appreciate in future years. I think we have so many opportunities there. We have not gone further to master plan because naturally the land is not in our hands yet. But it is much cleaner for the governor's proposal to be reviewed by the Senate and moved to the House so that people don't mess around with it. And in the end, he'll be happy to sign what he proposed. And the OHA trustees are very agreeable to that.
This measure passes out of the Senate today.
It passed out of committee today to the full Senate.
Committees.
So it will go to the full Senate for a floor vote.
Yes.
You know, one of the things that we had been critical of in the last proposal, and when we compared this last proposal with this, the last proposal had some big problems in that it was global settlement, and also the lands, you know, were not lands that we thought were appropriate lands. You know, I'm wondering if maybe this is a good time for us to talk about what was wrong with the last one, and then take a look at how the current one compares to that.
Right. I think the biggest concern that I had when we were doing our own due diligence was the idea that it was a global settlement, and we just thought that it was ridiculously low. So the opportunity to have a limitation here, I think it's about 34 years, yeah, if you do the numbers, is attractive. It's such a tough thing, you know, to really come to the table and say, okay, is this good? Can we do better? Some of the other things, you know, they had the property in Hilo, the hotel that was going to be underwater in some time. There are many things about that settlement that just didn't really look attractive. And it was interesting because I went to one of the meetings. You were there.
Yes.
And it was actually a meeting designed for Hawaiian homesteaders. And my husband and I went and attended, and we listened to the presentation. And they discussed all the properties, and they showed those maps. And the worries that I have when I look at the current proposal, and it's just another worry that actually forwards itself into the future, is the idea of looking at these properties, and they have certain constraints to them. You know, and maybe you can talk a little bit about, for example, some of the properties already have leases and they're being transferred over with the lease intact. OHA is going to have to honor the lease until the end of the lease. Those kinds of things. There's also different types of buildings that, or they house different areas that I'm thinking are less attractive than an area, for example, the toxicity, it being located on lands that have been used in the past as dump sites, things of that nature. So we talked a little bit about that. So even though the prior settlement proposal was horrendous, and this one is definitely an improvement, I don't know what the magic time is to say, okay, this is where I don't think it's going to get any better. Another concern that was communicated is the fact that two of the parcels, I believe, are definitely identified as ceded lands or are Crown and government lands. And I think some of the community is a little upset at that because they're saying, why are we negotiating for lands that already belong to us? And I think that's a good point, you know. But of course, you know, OHA has their opinion. You might want to expand on it about taking that into consideration and why we would, as a community, as our Hawaiian community would.
Mm-hmm. Well, we talked about that ceded lands, and you know, we asked many times for a settlement, and we filed suits, and the Supreme Court kept throwing it back and saying, let the legislature decide. So the governor is trying to help us by having the legislature rule on this, but the ceded lands was brought up in many of our community meetings, and I believe that we have not gotten any ceded lands up until now, and the thought of the OHA trustees is that if we get lands in our possession now, we will be able to utilize it and develop it and be able to get more monies in to help our Hawaiian communities, our educational young people. I believe that is probably how we thought of the ceded lands. You look at the pluses and the minuses, and you tell yourself, it's better to have a bird in one hand than a bird in no hand. You know, we would like to have. Now, the interesting part about these lands, although they have leases that expire in the future, is that the day that it gets transferred to OHA, we start getting monies. We receive the rents. And today, we get $1.1 million a year in existing rents.
These are from the existing leases that are going to be transferred. Or these are revenues that are coming in at the present time on the 10 parcels.
Yes.
So from the time of the agreement, those leases are preserved, but the revenue from the lease is transferred to OHA.
Yes, it does.
You know, when I looked at the bill, there is a section that is entitled reservations. And when I took a look at it, I wondered, you know, if the state is transferring these lands to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs as a settlement, why should the state be reserving anything to itself? But then when I took a look at it, interestingly enough, what the state is reserving are native tenant rights. The document is saying that these lands are transferred to OHA State Agency, but the rights of the native tenants to these parcels are preserved under state law, which made some sense. I was happy to see that. Minerals are also reserved to the state, and the submerged lands, which raises an interesting question, which I think we can take a look at on the show, which is, you know, if you're saying to OHA, here's a parcel, it is on the harbor, then how can the state reserve the submerged lands to themselves if OHA has harbor lands? Would OHA have the right to actually access the harbor? Could they, for instance, invite the hokulea to come and moor there for cultural purpose? Or could they invite tour operators to bring people in and hook up and bring them to the shops that are there? I know that this question came up and it was discussed at the board table by yourself and
Yes.
Trustee Akana and were there other trustees who
Just
joined you in
both
that
of us.
concern?
Yeah. Well, we did discuss this, and in our tour out there, we were able to see why the state might have reserved the submerged lands, because from the Fisherman's Wharf side all the way across the harbor, that's all submerged lands, part of the lands not offered to us. And I believe that that's why it was reserved. However, we were able to negotiate it back into our agreement that that is something that we are not giving up the right to.
Oh, I'm happy to
Submerged
hear
land.
that.
Yes.
So you're saying that this was actually negotiated and put into the agreement?
Yes.
Now, is it in the governor's bill or is it in the companion entitlements measure?
I believe it's in the governor's bill.
Well, that certainly is interesting because the governor's bill says if there's any material changes, it is null and void, which means that to agree to that it would not be a material change, that it would be something for clarity.
Well, I have to clarify that. It's not particularly in the bill itself, but it's in the agreement between the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and the governor, which is a very lengthy agreement. So the submerged lands have been taken out so that we still have the right to.
You know, I didn't realize there was a separate agreement until you mention it now. I have only been really looking at the information, came out from both the governor's office and OHA, as well as the bill
no,
in the
we have a very-
legislature. We have some questions here. What about climate change? Won't these lands be underwater if sea levels rise? And then here's a person asking, would ocean rights and usage fronting the properties be included? I mean, it's the very question we're talking about here, but did anyone look at sea level rise?
We did. Actually, first of all, as far as the rights to the ocean, OHA plans to leave a promenade area completely from Ala Moana out to the point of the last lot, so that people can utilize the promenade area and always be able to access the ocean. So we're very happy with that plan. What was your other question?
I think we actually have already answered it in terms of the usage of that area, that is actually covered. It is not mentioned in the bill, but is in the separate agreement. You know, I'm glad to hear that because I wanted to look at the issue of valuation. What concerned me was that we have a settlement here for $200 million. When you looked at the due diligence, were you satisfied that these properties were worth $200 million? When I spoke with Senator Clayton He about this matter a couple of weeks ago, he told me that he felt OHA was being shortchanged by about $40 million. He placed the value of these lands at $160 million, but I did not see any appraisal. I know you have seen the current appraisals, and with your background in land, what do you think about this? Are we looking at $200 million worth of lands here?
Very, very close. We have had two appraisals, one at 199 point something million dollars and one at 193. And that's today's appraisal. Now, anybody in real estate can tell you that we're at low times in Hawaii. So if we look 2-3 years in advance, I believe that these lands will be worth much more than the 200 million. This is my personal opinion and not that of the trustees. It's my personal opinion as a real estate broker. I think this is going to be a wonderful area that our Hawaiians can enjoy and our local people.
I have a question for you. You know, earlier you had commented that, you know, as soon as the transaction takes place, OHA will take hold of these properties, and
Yes.
you can start building and making money and doing the things that you want to do. What is the role that the Community Development Corporation, is that the name of them?
HCDA,
Right.
the Hawaii Community Development
Agency.
Authority or agency plays. It was my understanding that they have a vision for many of these parcels of land, and that OHA has had to agree to follow their plan and what they have already decided that is going to be used for the land in the future. So how does that play with and support what you said earlier about you being able to do what you guys want or what we want to do?
Actually, that statement is not quite true. We did not agree to use their master plan. We have admiration of their master plan, and we will certainly consider. The master plan they presented us was beautiful. It doesn't mean that we will use all of it or part of it. I believe that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is going to do its own master plan, and we will consider everything that this HCDA, Hawaii, yeah. We will consider all that they have done. There is actually a group of people that have been working on a master plan for quite a few years, since I believe 1994. And they were the people that presented this master plan to the trustees, in fact, very recently, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was an excellent plan. Not saying that we will stick by it, but we will have the freedom of doing whatever we want. Now, the nice thing about HCDA is that it's a state agency, and we will not be required to go through the county at all.
Okay.
You know, so
You know, I just want to ask you, how is it actually going to work, though, Hulu? We have the HCDA, which has had jurisdiction over this land. When I looked at the settlement legislation, it said that the HCDA would continue to have some authority for zoning, land use, conditions, and other matters, which is, you know, zoning is clear to me. Land use is clear to me, but I don't know if it means here's the plan, you have to take it. You're saying it does not, but I didn't know what conditions and other matters were. What does that mean? Is there some kind of friendly negotiation going on between OHA and the HCDA?
Well, HCDA has been very encouraging, and I believe since it's a state agency that they will be nice to us. You know, and I think the governor will also help us along, since this is his offer to us as well. I have trust in him that he's going to see that we be able to do what we want to do with it. Now, we have 10 lots, and 5 of them are commercial waterfront. The other 5 are mixed-use commercial. You know, we can have restaurants, we can have a cultural center, we can have offices. In fact, we were just talking very lightly that we would like very well for us to have a very large building, and this is thought of on the E-lot abutting Ala Moana, that will service all of our Hawaiian agencies, you know, with our offices being there.
Well, I'm sure glad to hear that. You know,
Aluli K.
kills me.
Yeah, you know that rent that
No,
they
I
pay.
know, $1 million a year OHA has
Yeah,
paid year
yeah.
after year.
that.
And, so, you know, I'm glad to hear that OHA is considering that they could actually use this land for their own offices and other offices for other agencies too. But doesn't Bishop Estate also have some land in this area?
They have some land across the street. Kamehameha Schools is coming in with 7 towers, a total of 3,200 condominiums right across the street from Kaka'ako.
You know, since we're talking about the Bishop Estates plan for 3,200 condominiums, when I spoke with Senators He and Solomon about this measure, the issue of affordable housing was raised. And Senator He told me that he had wanted to insert language into the measure that would give OHA the option of looking at the choosing and supporting some development of housing in this area. What has become of that?
A new bill has been written up by the senators, Senate Bill 682, allowing residential development on 2 lots, the 2 lots that abut Ala Moana. The feeling of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is that our concentration is on the main settlement bill, and as long as everybody agrees with Senate Bill 682, that is a blessing for us, but our concern is passing the main settlement bill.
You know, Manu had just raised an issue that we've talked about here, and actually on previous shows we've had many questions that came up about toxicity. And there were, in the last settlement proposal, there were some parcels that were toxic, and there was opposition from the community. We know that the lands in this area have similar toxicity problems. Some of them have actually been rehabilitated and are currently being used as a park, but I wanted to talk about that issue of toxicity. When you looked at the due diligence report, what did it reveal on this point of toxicity? And how can development proceed when you have a toxic parcel?
Well, it is it's a fact that the lands there were underwater at one time, and then there was like trash and then ash. But you know, I'd just like to point out that the John A. Burns School of Medicine is built there very successfully, as well as the Discovery Children's Museum. And they were able to mitigate this problem. The U.S. Cancer Research Center is there as well in the very same area. So we're hoping to mitigate our toxicity in similar ways. What we have done is we've applied to the Brownsfield with the federal government, and the federal government has approved our application, and in fact is on the property at this very moment doing that work.
Before we go further, I think you need to explain what does it mean when you're saying Brownsfield, for people who may not understand what Brownsfield is.
You may know better than I do, but I know it's the ceiling of toxicity that is under the ground in order for us to be able to build. Now, the cost of cleaning up toxicity anyway depends on what we want to build. You know, if it's a very large building, and I'd like to just say that all of the lots along the ocean cannot go above 65 feet. That is the limit. So if you are a builder, you'll know that you don't have to go very deep with a 65-foot high building. So in my opinion, the cost of cleaning up is not going to be as expensive as people may think.
But when you say the feds have come in, because the federal government, as I understand it, gives money to help you clean up the toxicity so that you can use the area. I know when I went there myself to look at it, you know, when you walk in the park in that area, there are big vents that are in the ground, and they're there so that methane gas can escape. But as you had mentioned, the entire area had previously been used by the county as a dump site, but there are many now commercial buildings, including the medical centers. They certainly were not worried about it, but it was pointed out to me that methane gas does escape and that they have made provision for it. You know, we're getting to the end of our show. I just wanted to raise the last point, and that is, it seems that there's this disagreement that has come out of the legislature over the entitlements. There's a settlement package, and then there's a separate entitlements disagreement. And when I looked at it, you were trying to explain it to me, we actually now have 2 bills. The proposal from the governor, which moves forward without amendment and change, and then the second bill, 682, I don't really understand why there's a disagreement about the entitlements. Is it coming to OHA for OHA's use, or is it not?
Well, it is going to come to OHA for our use, but you know, there's a difference of opinion in the legislature as to what we should have, and I think there's a bigger agreement among the majority of the legislators that the governor has a great offer and is offering OHA a great offer. So we don't want to upset that offer because we really want to receive those lands. However, we have senators that are Hawaiians, and they want to see us have more than what is being given to us, and this is the purpose of their bill. So we're saying we appreciate it, we can come back again, but please let the first bill pass, the settlement bill, and we can take another step, whether it's this year or later. We just need to take one step at a time, and that was the feeling of the trustees. Just let us have this first bill, and we'll be very happy to have entitlements later.
Here's a question, I don't understand it, but let me pose it. This relates to RCDH. Was there a change to the plan where OHA now does not have to go through RCDH to take any action? Do you understand that question?
I don't know what RCDH means.
I don't either. Let me ask you this question, though. People are asking, what has been the outcome of the OHA community meetings? And I just want to say, the first thing is that message got across loud and clear. The last time we saw a settlement, there was no community meetings. There was no effort. We had to have a huge fight in Hilo, demand the Attorney General come up. This time around, there have been meetings. How many? And what's happening?
We've had 30 meetings. We've had 30 meetings, and most of the meetings I attended, and it was very encouraging. We had some communities that were not happy with the agreement.
Are they Oahu or neighbor island communities?
No, Maui wasn't happy. I was looking on the online.
Maui wasn't happy, but you know what was encouraging about Maui? When we were done with the meeting, I got calls from the people that were against it and told me they understand it, and yes, let's take the land. And they happened to be ohana of mine, you know, Nelson Armitage and his brother Wayne. Uncle Les Kuloloia came to the first meeting and wasn't really happy with the settlement. He came to the second meeting and he was like all for it. And he told me, "Sister, you take that. You know, we should have it." Yes.
Yeah, very. You know, that is interesting because Uncle Les Kuloloio is kupuna that is widely respected,
Yep.
and he, although he is, of course, from Maui, he also sits as the Ahakiole representative for the island of Kaho'olawe, and for many years has looked after that. So I'm interested in hearing that. You attended one of the meetings here on Oahu. What was your impression?
I thought it was interesting. It was very well prepared, and they went through, like I said earlier, you know, went through the map, went through the different parcels that they were trying to get in the settlement. They talked about it not being a global settlement. The dynamic was one of the interesting things I thought happened at that meeting was when your attorney, Bill Mehe'ula, got up and started speaking, and one of the questions that my husband asked at that time, he said, you know, can we, I don't know if you remember this, but he said, you know, can we take a look at the settlement? Is it on the OHA website? And he said, no, we've been told not to do that. And that kind of surprised us because we thought, well, you know, it should be transparent for all beneficiaries to look at. And then he subsequently went ahead and emailed Ke'amoku and said, oh, you know what, we talked to the AG's office and now it's up on the website. So it's there for people to look at. I think that's promising that you can listen to the community and then you can take a further step back and say, should we actually do this? What are we worried about? What do we owe to the community? And let's move forward with it. So that was promising.
You know, I was glad to see it get posted, and I'm really happy that Dexter has been sending this out. Dexter Kaiama, our Native Hawaiian attorney on this issue that's been looking at it for months now. He's been keeping people involved. But I got to tell you, it was so funny to me when the issue came up about why there was no information posted. The governor's office didn't post anything, but they had the press release. They had the press conference.
Right.
But then OHA had a response. It came in the paper, but OHA didn't post anything. The funny thing is that the First Friday show posted everything, the maps, the valuations and that, and it was public information that we actually had received from OHA and the governor's office. It didn't make sense to us. We posted it, and actually I'm happy now that it is posted. There's been 30 meetings. Are there more scheduled at this point? Have we completed the community?
We've completed.
Now, as the bill goes forward, we're going to continue to have hearings.
Yes.
Do you anticipate that there will be other issues that are going to be raised now? Senator He's concerns, Senator He works with members on the other side of the legislature. Sometimes when his points are not taken, he will go into the House. But what do you anticipate in terms of the House review now?
Actually, I think they were waiting for the Senate bill to come over.
Yes.
And I feel very confident that they'll accept it as long as it's unamended. And I really appreciate Malama Solomon and Clayton He's concern for added entitlements. And I think presenting it in a separate bill is probably the right way.
I gotta say, I was really very happy to see Senator Solomon and he, but what's interesting is that they were really looking at the detail, and both of them have a history of being OHA trustees. And I think that although they're sitting in the Senate, when this matter came up, they took off their senator hats and they put on their OHA trustee hats and started driving for more. And I'm hoping, because both of them have significant power and clout on the Senate side, I'm hoping that they'll continue to keep oversight even though the bill passes into the House, because the game in the legislature is horse trading. And as the Senate bills are now being considered in the House, so will the House bills be considered in the Senate. So you can bet if the House takes action the Senate doesn't like, they just might have a problem with their own bills on the other side. You know how it is in the state legislature. But we'll keep an eye on this as it moves through the House. We've got a few more months, and I'm sure that other issues are going to be coming up. For yourself, Trustee Lindsey, I think we're all real happy that you are there, because it's pretty clear that you have the capacity to take a look at this settlement. And I think for myself, because it's been many years, and even as a trustee, it was hard to see what we can do to push this in the right direction. For those of you who are tuning in, aloha. You heard it first on the First Friday show.
Aloha. Thank you.
Can you conceive the concept created in my brain? Apologies accepted, but the grudge remains as I strain to ease the pain that my people feel, while other people say it's no big deal. Charge one, grand larceny. Uncle Sam better wash his hands because they're filthy. He did the dirty deed, can't you see it's hurting me? So I live my life day by day, keep asserting myself, so that I may reach my full potential. Thanks and praise is not essential, and so thank God for making me what I am, cause I'm a true Hawaiian. What's a true Hawaiian? What is a true Hawaiian? What is a true Hawaiian?
It's the Hawaiian, the true Hawaiian. The only way I know how to live is Hawaiian. No matter where I go, I'll always be Hawaiian trained. To understand, keep Hawaiian lands in Hawaiian hands.